consider it an honor to address you on this topic. My heartfelt thanks to those who afforded me this opportunity. I'm going to speak to you about emotional courage. I'm going to talk to you about the courage to admit you need help. And this is how it's going to go. I'm going to give you a great quote, and I want you to remember the quote. I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'm going to tell you three ways that we gain emotional courage to get help. If you're going to tune me out, that's fine. Okay? I give you permission. But you can't do it until you've heard the quote. All right? When I start telling stories, go ahead and zone out. Completely fine. Here's the quote. Brene Brown, in her work, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead, writes, "The perception that vulnerability is weakness is the most widely accepted myth about vulnerability, and the most dangerous." And the most dangerous. All right, so this is the point where you remember that, okay? Write it down in your napkin or whatever, and then go back to sleep. I want to begin with a story. I'm going to tell you a story of a young lieutenant. The young lieutenant was transferred from his reserve unit in January of 2003. Many of you remember January, February, and March of 2003. Many of you remember it like it was yesterday. Some of you, if you're honest, have woken up from a dream and could smell it still in your nostrils. This young lieutenant was transferred in January of 2003 from his reserve unit, and he was transferred to a unit that was deploying. The full gravity of the situation didn't really sink in for this lieutenant until, as his convoy was headed north through Kuwait to go somewhere else, there was another convoy headed south in the opposite lane. And that convoy was not made up of Humvees, it was not made up of military vehicles, it was made up of black sedans and black SUVs bearing the blue flag of the UN. And as they retreated, we advanced. And he saw that. He saw that happening. And so, after that tour, this young lieutenant, he probably should have gone and talked to someone. He probably should have gone and gotten some help. But he didn't. After that, a short 10 months later, his original unit, the unit he'd been transferred from, his original unit was tapped to go. They were tasked to go to Southwest Asia. And this lieutenant, now a captain, he couldn't let his unit go without him. He had experience. He knew what was up. These were his people. He couldn't let them go by themselves. And so, for another period of time, for another 15 months of being Title 10, this lieutenant went again. And it was after that deployment, the young lieutenant, I have two microphones that are on. It's weird. It was after that second deployment that lieutenant should have gone and talked to somebody, or the captain should have gone and talked to somebody. He should have gotten some help. He should have found somebody that could listen. But he didn't. And it was after that deployment the captain decided that active duty was the place for him. He applied and was accepted for active service. Unfortunately, Big Army didn't have his reserve record, because the reserves used a 2-1, not an ORB. The former reservists in the room all just laughed. And so, because I had no deployments under my belt, Big Army thought, let's send him again. And so for 15 months I was deployed. And it was after that deployment that I probably should have gone and gotten some help. But I didn't. My next assignment, I was pretty messed up. I'd been in a combat zone for over 3 years out of the last 5. And at that assignment, a colonel asked my battalion commander if he could mentor me. And this colonel took me under his wing, and he created an environment of grace. He created an environment of freedom where I could declare who I was, who I really was, and the demons I was wrestling, and the things that were going bad, wrong in my heart and mind. And it was that enabled me to admit that I needed to go talk to someone, that I needed to get some help. This colonel created an environment of grace. He got me to the point where he could ask me, "Hey man, how are you really doing? How are you really doing?" And I responded, "Sir, I am a train wreck going somewhere to happen." And it was that day that I agreed to go and get some help. The courage to seek help is a monumental thing. I stood for 2 whole minutes in front of my therapist's office before I could bring myself to reach out and turn the door handle. It was so hard to admit that I needed some help. It is a monumental thing. This chaplain, this colonel who created this environment of grace, we find the courage to seek help in community. This colonel created a community. He created an environment where it was safe to say, "I'm hurting." It was safe to say, I'm not meeting the standard. It was safe. We find it in community. Part of that community is my wife, who sits here today, who loved me when I was not the lovable self that you see in front of you right now. I was actually very particularly unlovable. And she won't tell you that, so I will tell you that. Community, this courage to seek help is found in community. Scott Bader points out in his work, Following Jesus in a Culture of Fear. He says, we learn courage from those that have walked down the aisle of defeat and have managed to get back up. If you are looking to build your courage to seek help, surround yourself with people that have failed miserably, but gotten back up. Find those people. Find that community. Find the folk that have fallen flat on their face and are completely honest about it. Because by God's grace, they got back up. My hope and my prayer is that you're able to find that community, perhaps within one of our chapel communities. My hope is that our chapels are places like that. I can tell you with 100% certainty that I have the utmost confidence in almost all of the chaplains in this room. And you know who you are. No, I'm just being serious. We find the courage to seek help in community. We find courage to seek help in creeds. Merriam-Webster defines creed as a statement of the basic beliefs of a religion. In studying the Bible, I'm more and more convinced that we are in so much worse shape than we think we are. It's so much worse than you think. And God's love is so much greater than you give Him credit for. He knows it all. He knows that thing that if I confessed your sin right now in front of all these people, that you would be mortified. Jesus knows about that. And yet, He loves you with a love greater than you can imagine. The Bible is filled with one exception, with absolutely flawed individuals. Every hero of the Bible is incredibly flawed, except for one. And the perfect one had to come because we so desperately needed His help. In the 27th Psalm, David writes, "Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they breathe out violence. I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord." Ideally, as we find courage in community, and as we find courage in creeds, as we find the courage to seek help in those things, ideally, they will point us to find courage in the Creator. The one that spoke everything into existence by the power of His words. The Creator of the universe. The writer of Hebrews writes, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. The one who spoke everything into existence knows your burden. He knows your bruised elbows. He knows your scraped knees. He knows your broken toys. He knows your pain." We have a high priest who knows what we are going through. As it is my prayer for you that you would have the courage to reach out and ask for help. Have the courage to say, "Hey, yeah, I can use a helping hand." We've got social work and counseling interns that work for me. They've got resources out there, points of contact. We would love to be in contact with you. We would love to help you. Because, yeah, as a family life chaplain, it's part of my job to counsel. But I think that perhaps I might also know your pain. I think I might have been where you've been. And I would love to work with you and to walk alongside you and to help. You know that colonel at the beginning, that was Chaplain Colonel retired Christopher Wisdom. And the captain was me. And he's